So again, we're really pleased to have Mairead Maguire, 1976 Nobel Peace Laureate from Northern Ireland, also honorary sponsor of the Centre for Global Non-Killing, and someone who has been inspiring and instrumental all the way in the work that we've been doing. Of the Peace Laureates, personally I feel she's one of the most energizing and inspiring voices that has been over many years not only engaging in non-violent action in some of the most devastating places in the world, starting from her own experience with the ethnic and religious issues in Northern Ireland. And of course we also have Anne Patterson from Peace People who will be sharing her views. But she's been active in many other ways with the Nobel Women's Organization, with her own work in Peace People. And I couldn't think of somebody better with her understanding of peace in a very broad way, of non-violence and of non-killing, to get it started and energize it in this 2 days of reflection, where we will seek to clarify and find ways to make the Sustainable Development Goals 16.1 and 16 in general to achieve peaceful societies with significantly lesser rates of homicide everywhere and other forms of violence. So I really truly welcome her and please ask her to share her inspiring thoughts with us today. So thank you very much, Mairead.
Well, good morning to you all. I'm really very, very happy to be with you. I would like to thank those who greeted us this morning, the Chancellor and Joan and the organisers of the conference, for their very kind invitation to be with you. I am here with my great friend Anne Patterson. We have been in the peace movement since 1976, and one of the greatest joys of working for peace is indeed the friendships that you have the honour of developing. I would like to thank each and every one of you this morning for what you're doing for peace, because anyone who gets up when it's cold and there's snow on the ground at 8 o'clock in the morning and comes to listen for a whole hour to someone vague thoughts about peacemaking is indeed already a peacemaker. So thank you to each and every one of you for coming. I think it's very important, and I feel very privileged and honoured to address such an audience, because you are already not only on your own journey into peace and outwards towards peace, you are studying how we can teach peace. Isn't it incredible that we as a human family should be into the 21st century now only seriously looking at how we build peace, both on an individual level and a collective level? Isn't that extraordinary that it has taken us so long to come to this point in our human development, that we are recognizing that with peace, everything is possible. Without peace, nothing is impossible. You see, if we don't have peace, we don't have development. If we don't have peace, we can't, both as individuals, have fully creative, imaginative, wonderful, joyous, happy, exciting lives. If we can't have peace in our own hearts, in our own life, then how are we to spread peace, or teach peace, or talk about peace? You know, someone once said, there is no way, peace is the way. So our greatest challenge is, was it Einstein said, we are intellectual geniuses and we are moral pygmies. We don't somehow have reached the point in our human development when our personal, emotional and spiritual development and value systems of treating each other with the greatest respect and love and solving our problems without killing each other. We haven't reached that point. And that's quite a big challenge for those of you in the audience today and those who are linking into us in different parts of the world through the brilliant technology of streaming. You know, technology has given us so much, and we must be grateful for that. But we need to match that with a value system, an ethic system, a moral system, a set of international laws and human rights which match the magnificence of what we have done with technology. We need to somehow be able to connect the head and the intellect and the heart and the compassion. And to me, this is where we have not made the connect. Gandhi talked about the need to have the head and the heart connected. And somehow we need to reconnect and relink the head and the heart. You know, it's all right to be a brilliant scientist. That's wonderful. But it's very wonderful to have a heart of love and compassion. It's very wonderful to see a young child moved by beauty and able to appreciate the beauty and moved by the other world, which sometimes the humans forget. You know, I have a little granddaughter. I have 6 grandchildren. I'm very blessed. And I have my youngest granddaughter just has a passion for cats. And to watch her look after her little kitten and grow into a cat with such care for this little animal. And I think, you know, we can learn much from children, how they appreciate the wholeness of life. You know, they can go out and look at a daisy and see the beauty in it, and look at a cat and see the beauty of creation and enjoy and be happy around that beauty. And somehow when we grow up, as we say, we lose our childhood ability to just see the beauty around us. We lose our childhood ability to see a creation as a wholeness. And instead, we allow the ego to take over. Because we become the center. We humans become the center of everything. Instead of being a part of a wonderful creation. And I congratulate those who wrote the Vasa Declaration. It's well worth reading from the university here. Because I think you have grasped a sense of the collectiveness of life. And you've kind of challenged us in that statement to take ourselves out of the center and to recognize that we are only part of the human and part of the non-human and part of the creative world. We are only part of all this. And that helps us to be, maybe in our life, a little more humble in how we try to do things. I don't like the word humility when it means, in the old-fashioned term, that we are less than others. I believe each human person is a magnificent specimen of creation and a tribute to the God, whatever you want to call him or her. Each human person is very special, very beautiful. And we need to celebrate that. But we need to recognize that we are neither inferior nor superior to each other. We are just doing our best, and we need to be kind to each other. People talk about barriers and breaking down barriers, and of course we need to do that, and boundaries that divide us as the human family in the world today. But the greatest barrier that we each need, I feel, to overcome is these barriers we put up between us and the other person. The barrier of being unable to reach out and, as they say in the songs, touch someone else. We live in our own cocoons, in our own area, in our own safety area. And the ability to be able to reach out to each other and see in each other ourselves, the struggle as a human being to find some kind of peace, to find some kind of happiness, to be able to celebrate life. And you know, someone once said the greatest wonderful thing is to see another person fully alive and happy. One of the great poets, was it the American poet Ginsberg, said that the great tribute is to be able to see a fully alive human being enjoying their life. And when we go through life, isn't it tragic that so many people get to the other side of it and have never really come into that inner joy, that inner peace, that childness of being able to see the beauty in others, the beauty in nature, the beauty in creation. And that's the real boundaries we have to learn to take down. So you as educators, how do we get through this awful fear that we carry as human beings? This awful sense of maybe we're not good enough. Maybe we'll only be good enough when we get our next degree or our master's or the next position. Maybe we can be happy then and good enough then. No. How do we get help and enable human beings to be able to break through into inner joy and happiness? You know, I had a great friend, Father Johnson. His writings are beautiful. Father William Johnson was from Belfast, my home city. He spent all his life teaching in Tokyo, and he tells a lovely story in his spiritual writings. He met a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said to him, Father Johnson, in your teachings, you help people to break through. I'm afraid too often in my work, I see people who break down. You know, when we talk about peace, it's not just the absence of violence. It's not just stopping wars. It's not just fulfilling all the sustainable development goals by 2030, important as all those things are. But peace is learning the ability to be happy in your own skin, to be able to be a peaceful person and to build peace around you. Peace starts in the heart. It goes out to the community. It goes out to the world. And that's our big challenge. So for me, I believe peace is both a spiritual journey inwards and a political and spiritual journey outwards. We've got to do both. It's a huge, huge challenge. Let me take you back to Northern Ireland. It's a very interesting thing to examine for anyone studying peace. Because whenever you look at what happened in the conflict in Northern Ireland, what lessons are to be learnt from a situation? And this is why we're here, to listen and to learn. The importance of listening to each other and to what the other person's saying. We're not really very good at listening. We all know how to talk, especially the Irish. Are the Finnish like that? Are they good talkers? But the Irish know how to talk. They also know how to tell a story. But the thing is, too, if you come to Ireland, I'm going to give you one perspective on Northern Ireland, but I could bring any amount of people and they'll give you different perspectives. There are almost always more than one perspective on any situation. We come at it from our own experience, and we have to listen to each other. So the telling of the stories is very important, because then we can see this little bit of the jigsaw puzzle and maybe add the other little bits. So always remember the power of telling your story, because that is really how we learn from other people's stories. And always believe, too, in the power of your own emotions. You know, people say, oh, be master of your emotions, or women are too emotional, or she's quite naive because she's emotional. And we dismiss each other by saying the emotions, you know, they're not thinking, they're not intellectualizing enough. But emotions are powerful, because we all carry these powerful emotions, and unless we learn how to understand them and to own them, because it was the emotions in Northern Ireland in 1976 of thousands and thousands of ordinary people who came onto the streets in Northern Ireland in 1976 out of absolute horror of what was happening in our community and in our country. It was coming apart at the seams with violence. From every single area, it was being destroyed. And my sister's children died in August 76. 3 little children. Can you imagine? Anne goes out walking, and a couple of hours later, 3 little children, all killed, all dead, because of violence between certain sections in our community. But it was people coming out and saying, enough is enough. This violence has got to stop. We have to stop killing each other. We can solve our problems without killing each other. Stop. And tomorrow when Anne speaks, she will show you the video and talk about this movement, which was ordinary people, 90% ordinary women, way back in 1976, who said, stop the violence. Now, in our world today, we feel we're overwhelmed by the violence. Everywhere you turn, you see a lot of violence. But we must also keep it in perspective, because everywhere you turn, there's a great deal of kindness and love and compassion, and people rearing their children and getting on with their lives. You know, we record the wars in our history. We don't record that the vast majority of ordinary men and women, should they live here, should they live in any other part of the world, are getting on with their lives, trying to do the very best they can, trying to spread a little bit of love and trying to help others. And that's where the hope is. It is in the people who have tremendous power of love to really, really change things. And if you're asking to me, how do we change the world? You are the change in the world. You, each one of you, if you make a choice, and life's all about choices, if you make a choice to do something that enhances life, that beautifies life, that creates life, then you are the change makers in your world today. But if you make a choice to use your great gifts and your education, because you are privileged, and if you make that choice to use it to build weapons of destruction and something that will destroy the environment, destroy life, or just to make money and store up money, then that's a bad life choice, and you are not one that's going to really change the world in the way we need it changed. Let me go back to 1976, when we were on the brink of civil war in Northern Ireland. I'm not going to go into the history of Ireland or Northern Ireland. You can Google it. Isn't Google wonderful? It never ceases to amaze me that you can Google the world, literally. And that will help us change the world, literally. But in Northern Ireland, our history is one of ethnic political conflict, going back centuries. And it's one of the most deeply complex situations in the world. And in 76, people would have argued, when the heart was being bombed out of Belfast, when we had gunmen and women on our streets planting bombs, when we had the British Army on our streets, when our civil liberties and human rights were removed, when we had torture in our police stations, because we know all that, we lived all that. But when we had all that, somehow there was the cycle kept going on, and there was no break in the violence because it was just multiplying. But when the civil community came out in 1976 and said, we want peace, we're going to stop the violence, we don't have guns, we don't want to be protected by anybody, we are the civil community and we are going to solve this problem. And that worked, because in the first 6 months of the peace movement, with people mobilizing, with networking, with having tremendous courage, there was a 70% decrease in the violence. So civil communities are very important as peace builders. If you want to look at it in Northern Ireland, what happened was that you had extremists on both sides using guns and violence and armed struggles and war. And you had on the other side politicians and spiritual leaders who were paralyzed. But when people came out and mobilized and networked and organized and joined together, and that together is an important word. No one will do this alone. Let's not wait for some great leaders to come into the world to change it. We are the change agents in our world today. And just by reaching out to each other, by involving the trade unions, involving the churches, involving everyone that we could think of, the business community, and saying, we have to do this non-violently. Change came. Slowly, but it came. So the importance of the civil community as the bridge, if you want, between the extremes works. And we don't do this because we're inclined to say, well, the politicians will bring the change, the political leadership will do it, someone else will do it. I can't do it really. But yes, we have to do it. So I think that bringing into the whole thinking the importance of the civil community in peace building. Women's roles in peace building is incredibly important. In 76, we had a huge majority of our movement were ordinary women who'd never done a political act in their lives. This was 76. And they were coming out saying, we don't want any more killing. we want to do this peacefully. So please, let's listen to the voice of the minorities, like the women, like children. Children are great peacemakers. And let's bring them in. In every political process, we should implement Article 1325, the UN article, which says that women should have a percentage and be at all decision-making tables, particularly in the like of peace processes. And in Northern Ireland, we had the women who came forward and formed a new party in order to take their seats around the table making in the peace agreement. And again, Anne will speak more about that issue tomorrow. But let us empower and encourage and stand up for women's rights, and let women take their right to be there at the decision-making tables and to be involved in the political process if they choose, or be involved in the peace movement. So I think that we need to look at what are we saying when we are involved in these decision-makings? What are we saying when we are involved in the community? I think as women we're saying, stop the killing, stop murdering each other, stop believing that we have a right to kill each other. I mean, what a lie have we based our society on? Not only do we take upon ourselves the right to kill each other, we take upon ourselves the right to organise and arm and equip and fund each other in order to kill other human beings. Stop and think about that. That is how our societies are organised and based. Sometimes we think, well, it really doesn't have a lot to do with me. But yes, it does have a lot to do with every single one of us. The fact that we accept this mobilisation for killing, and we've done it completely down through history. We are now here sitting in the heart of Europe. And I think Europe has an important role to play and choice to make in the way ahead. Europe needs to get onto a different road, change its policies. Here in the Nordic countries, NATO has been carrying out war exercises, and this really absolutely makes my mind blow. Billions of pounds and dollars are being spent for all these countries, in the Nordic countries and others, to come together to train war. How do you make war? How do you go to war? And to get the very best of our brains in the world today, and to get the very most of our budgets to go into militarism. And they're preparing for war in Europe in the 21st century. Oh my God, how wrong we got it. We need to look at solving the problems through conflict resolution, through dialogue, through negotiation, through governments changing their policies and sitting down and saying, we're one human family, we've only got limited amount of resources. How do we adopt policies that are going to help us as the human family literally survive? So for me, Europe is on the brink of a choice. Do you go down the military road, the war road, or do you go on to the peace road, the negotiation, the dealing with our problems in a different way? I personally believe and would hope that Europe will make a choice of moving on to the road of peace. And I hope that countries like you, which are very, very important, Finland, the Nordic countries are important. If you make the choice, and I know Finland is not in NATO, but if you make the choice to remain neutral but be serious peacemakers in the world today, you have a tremendous role of turning this thing around, particularly if you link up with the like of Sweden and the other Nordic countries. Your role, which used to be under the old European Union, the peacemakers in the world, you are now part of the war machine. People say in Europe, oh, well, we don't go to war. But remember that we have had war constantly, and particularly now since 9/11. One war after another. And these wars, the Iraqi war, the war currently against Syria, the Libyan war, the Afghani war, these wars have destroyed whole countries. They've set these people back generations. And it's going to take a long time for these countries to be in any way able to be healed and to be able to solve their problems. And we in Europe must take responsibility for what we have done in mobilizing and funding and in carrying out these wars against the vast majority of whom are civilians. And NATO preparing to go for the next war, we should be out in our thousands and thousands in every street, in every city and in every village saying, disband NATO. Stop the wars. Why aren't we doing this? It's as if we are allowing the wars to happen and then we go pick up the pieces. You know, being a peaceful person, yes, of course you find time to sit on the mountain and you do your meditation. But by God, when you see a world with so much suffering and so many children suffering in the world today and so much pain and unnecessary destruction, you get down off that mountain and you go into the valley and pick up a spade and help rebuild this world and the countries that we have destroyed so much. And that's our big challenge in the world. Not to become disassociated from what is happening. I got an email 2 days ago from a great friend. I've been several times on and I've gone out with delegations to Syria at the request of the Syrian peace activists, come and help us. At the request of the Afghani peace activists, come and help us. At the request of the Congo peace activists, come and help us. And what can we do? We can only go out and say, we are saying no to NATO, disband NATO. We are saying no to war. We are saying yes to peace, to development, to human life, to the human family solving its problems without killing each other. But this email that came from my friend just a couple of days ago, a wonderful American peace activist who's working in the camps in Beirut in Lebanon, where we have been, he tells a story that is absolutely makes one feel deeply ashamed of the kind of countries we are now living in and the civilizations that are not truly civilized when they're allowing this to happen. And he tells about going out onto the streets. He's a professor, works with archaeology, trying to save the sites and trying to save the children. And a woman came up and offered him 4 children to buy for $100. And he says, 4 little children of the same family. And she said that they were from Aleppo, and the mother and father had been killed, and she had brought these children to Beirut, and she was prepared to sell them to him for $100. And he said, I haven't got 100, I 600. And he went to his ATM machine, he got out 600, and he bought 4 Syrian children of the same family under the age of 7 for $600 on a street in Beirut. Now, this is a true story. I know him very well. And I'll send the details to anyone who want to know. And she took the 600 and she went off. They're currently trying to find out who's the family in Beirut so that the children can be returned. But we live in a world where people have no hope because they don't have jobs, their countries have been destroyed, they've been demonized, they are bombed, their leaders are demonized and won't be talked to because they're the criminals, while we send out bombs, drone bombs, NATO's. It's just we have got to change our thinking and change our ways of doing things if there has to be any hope for survival of humanity. In the final analysis, each of us chooses in our own life. Life's wonderful. You get to make choices. Isn't it great? And you have a free conscience. And always, I think, inform that conscience. Keep it a clear conscience. Don't let it get dulled. Don't buy in to a lot of values in our world today. That is about money making, and that is about putting up boundaries and taking a little bit here and a little bit there. Keep your conscience clear. And then follow your conscience. You know, we have kind of given our conscience over to others and let them make the choices in life for us. When in a sense we take our conscience, we educate ourselves, and we make hopefully informed and good choices in life. And after you do that, you know, that's your first priority and your great responsibility. And people who don't get education, and you're privileged, but people who don't get a chance to education, maybe don't be able to have the same kind of tools that you here can put your hand on. So that's why you can teach others and educate, and education. It's so important. But living in my own situation in Northern Ireland, you know, I remember in the height of the Troubles, meeting a young IRA gunman, and we seen violence on our streets, both from state violence and those who argued the armed struggle for allegedly political reasons of uniting Ireland. But I had to make my own choice living in that situation. And this young IRA man said to me, he was only about 14, I'm in the armed struggle. I'm fighting for a unified Ireland. And I said, really? Yes. And I believe in the just war. Really? Yes. I've read the just war theory, and I know all about just war. And this armed struggle is right. And that armed struggle was right. And that armed struggle was right. All right, yes. And the war's right. If, countries have to go, the right to protect, you have to go in there, and the armies should go in there. Well, I took off and read the necessary qualifications for a just war, which a lot of people still use as an excuse for going in and bombing other countries into the dark ages. But I read the necessary qualifications for just war. And to me, in the words of Father John L. Mackenzie, the great American theologian, just war theory is a phony piece of morality. I would love to ask you as students, how many people here have read the just war theory upon which a lot of our current wars are based and argued on? How many have read the just war theory? No hands up. You see, I went reading it, and to me it is a lot of rubbish. And Augustine got it wrong. And today it's being argued that we cannot go to war under certain circumstances, which can never be met. One of them being you don't harm civilians. What war has never not harmed civilians? So we need to throw out the just war theory and get a theology more in common with the spirit of Jesus and the Christian spirit for those of us who come from that background. But for the sake of the world too, who is using theology, old theology upon which to base its laws and its arguments for war and for Islamic State and for the IRA and for every thing that ever bombed people to bits and destroyed their lands and sent in armies to destroy their lands, to take their resources, because the armies have only gone into those countries to get what they can get their hands on in line of resources and oil. It's all about the oil. It's all about the money. It's all about control. It's all about domination. We have got to tell the truth of why these countries are going into other countries and taking their resources and killing their people. We have got to tell the truth and come to the truth, and that truth must start first with our own choice of whether to kill or not to kill. I made my own choice way back before the peace movement ever started, when I rejected a just war theory. And I rejected the whole concept that we have a right to kill each other. I've been given life as a gift, and I love my life. And I don't give anyone the right to take my life. And by the same account of justice, I will never take another human life, because I have no right to do so. So that choice of no killing and non-violence came to me, and I made it a long time ago. Now, we all get to make choices, but when you make the choice, you have to then follow that through. What about the injustice in the world? What about inequality? What about the fact that we have poverty? What about the fact that we don't have an equal world? How do you bring about justice? Well, you work passionately for justice. You know, and we know the steps. We know the steps very well now. We've learned a lot. We have the mediators. We have the negotiators. We know what to do in a conflict situation to stop the war. It's just we are not sending in the proper negotiators, the conflict resolutions, those who know about it. We're sending in the generals and the colonels who know how to make war, and whose answers is more war. It doesn't make sense. If you bake a cake and it falls flat, you put in different ingredients, you do it a different way. Why do we keep repeating the idea that militarism and war solve problems when we see the results of militarism and war? So if we choose non-killing and non-violence, then we choose also the responsibility and the right and the privilege and the joy of being a peace builder in our own life and in our country and in our world. And that is a tremendous exciting thing. It's far more exciting than learning to be a soldier and going off into Iraq or Libya or Afghanistan and killing somebody or dropping a bomb on them. I mean, give me peacemaking any day. At least you maintain your mental health and you can sleep at night. Because by what we are doing in training militaries, armies, we are putting out young men and women to the front line of moving out of their humanity and moving into learning how to kill, which is against our human nature. We're not born as killers. And, the Seville statement on violence, violence, we are not violent human beings. The World Health Organization, violence is a preventable disease. The Charter 13 on the Nobel Summit a few years back, we have a responsibility not to kill and responsibility not to kill others. So we know we have got to learn new ways, use new methods of love and compassion, forgiveness, understanding, reconciliation. These are the things we have got to become experts at. And then we can really, really change our world. Non-violence, non-killing does work. Perhaps because we have never put enough energy and training and belief in it. If you believe passionately of peace, and I do, then peace is possible. When we went to Syria, in Syria we went at the invitation of the Patriarch and the Grand Mufti in Damascus to see what was happening in Syria. And the Syrian people are a very beautiful people. And before this latest conflict broke out in Syria, they were change was happening to their country. But change takes time, political change takes time, but it was happening. And unfortunately, when the violence broke out, violence feeds violence and things get out of control. But what we did find in Syria was that there were thousands of foreign jihadists from different countries, over 100 different countries, who were in Syria, with the sole vision of trying to change the Syrian government, bring down Assad. That was their goal, to bring down Assad and the Syrian government, and to bring about an Islamic State. Now, those fighters were funded and trained and allowed to go into Syria, to villages and towns, and we were in them, and to murder people with the very best of equipment and weapons and money for a political agenda for other governments in order to destroy the Syrian government. That's the reality. It was a proxy war. And we should study more about proxy wars. You see, because they don't have, like the Second World War, you send in big armies and everybody knows there's a war going on. No. The militarists have learned to be more subtle than that. They've learned how you can bring down a government very easily by training others to fight your wars on the ground. And then you can dismiss them as the enemy then and do what you want with them. We have got, as peace activists, as people in universities and colleges, to understand what is happening in these countries that has been destroying their leaderships. First you demonize, we know the pattern, you demonize them, you make them the bogeyman, you focus in on them, and then when you've done that, and the Western media know how to do it, war propaganda, destroying regimes, this policy coming out from Western governments, particularly the like of America, Britain, France, and NATO, these policies of demonizing leaderships because they don't fit into their political agenda, or because they want to control the resources, because Syria was all about pipelines and oil and gas. These policies have got to be brought to the daylight, and Laity giving a language that understands what is happening and can mobilize to do something about it. Because if the academics remain in the academia world using language which ordinary men and women cannot understand, then how are we to connect as the academic world who have the facts and the history and the knowledge, and the ordinary people in communities such as my own who were trying to stand up against the violence from many areas, but there was no connect. So the academics have to find a way, use language that ordinary people understand for starters. It's not everybody gets to go to university and understand the big long words or spell them. Try to humanize and connect between universities and what you're learning and what is happening out there in the communities so that you're bringing them together. Because that is the only way that we're going to live together. If we all live in our own little areas, separated, we never understand what a proxy war is and what government policies are geared towards money, multi-corporations. I mean, for example, I'm sure you've been studying Obama's trade agreements, where power is going to be handed up over to billionaires and multi-corporations, where governments will no longer be able to legislate for human rights for their people because the power is being taken into corporations and multi-billionaires who will tell us what our human rights are. And if our governments stand up for us, for human rights, for liberty, for equality, for how far we have advanced in Europe, because Europe has come a long way in the human rights areas, if we don't maintain international law, human rights, equality, dignity of every single man, woman, the right to a job, the right to make his choices, the right to mobilize in trade unions, and the right for his voice to be heard, not silenced. If we don't do this, across the world and network and link and share our knowledge and demand international law and human rights be upheld, then this trade agreement it's a great threat to us all. It will remove many of our liberties, and democracy will lose out, because our governments will not have the ability to change laws unless they're going to be sued by some multinational corporation which has the power. Your responsibility as young men and women to know what's happening in the world, to help shape the policies of the future. Because people in government are not bad people, but the policies that are being implemented are not the right policies. The policies are destroying our environment, they're destroying our communities, they're destroying our ability to mobilize as men and women to bring about real change. So please, that responsibility for you is so huge. In Northern Ireland, I take it back to that. We solved an ethnic political conflict through dialogue, through listening to each other, through negotiation, through a ceasefire. There are steps. We talk to our enemy. That's very important. And again, in your statement, you talk about the need for reconciliation, for retribution, and for peacemaking. And that is so important. We have to learn how to be reconciled, how to dialogue. Every government should have a peace institution. We have governments for war, we have departments for war, and we have departments of foreign affairs. But how many departments of peace are in our governments that are advising our political leaders how to solve the problems without going to war? I mean, we haven't got that far, but we need to go there, because we need to learn to make peace. But above all here in Europe, and I speak as a European, and I'm very grateful for the fact that those who were the visionaries of a united Europe talked about bringing people together as brothers and sisters. Well, we are brothers and sisters. We are the world. It is our world. And we should be able to work together to solve problems. We can do it. People are geniuses. But let's not get stuck in the past, because it will destroy our creativity, our imagination, our ability to envision, our ability to lift our voices and be prophets in our world of a different way of living, because there's great hope. I am very, very hopeful for the future. And I've seen it in those countries I've visited with Anne and I, in Afghanistan and Syria. There's great people that are making peace. But we have to learn to talk to each other. We have to learn to stop demonizing leadership. We have to learn to talk. And Syria will be solved, but the people who are trying to make peace must speak to Assad and the government. You know, in Northern Ireland in 1976, we said, we will talk to anyone who can help bring peace here. Anyone. And we talk to our enemies. And now in Northern Ireland, we have people in our government who believed previously that the gun was the way. And we said, no, the gun's not the way. Come in and help us find a way. And that was the way, the breakthrough in our country. And that can happen in Syria. Insist on talking to your alleged enemy. I don't believe in enemies. Everybody has a bit of good in them and a dark shadow. So insist on talking to others, sitting down round the table, and stay at that table till the problem is solved. It is possible. And here in Europe, please, I hope that you will not allow others to make a wall between you and the Russian people. You know, we had a Cold War. It went on for far too long, and thank God eventually your wall came down. Please reach out, Finland, you have a history. Reach out to the Russian people and be friends with those in the East and Russia, and reach out to the West, to America, to Britain, to all the other countries, because we don't need enemies in this. You know, we are mature enough to hold in our head the ability to be friends with the East and the West and to get on together and to look for the hopeful signs. You know, when the Pope met in Cuba and he met the Orthodox Patriarch, that schism, that divide lasted 1,000 years. Tell me, do you know anybody else who had an argument going on for 1,000 years? 1,000 years. And, I mean, what was it even about? Were the Orthodox Christians and the Catholics, East and West, for 1,000 years, their patriarchs had not met and shook hands and greeted each other. We have to look for what is the prophetic thing to do. You know, when Sadat got on a plane all those years back and went into the heart of Israel and made friends with the Israelis, that touched people around the world because they imagined something different. And this is what we're all challenged to do. We know the problems. You have analysed them. But what's the new step? What's different that will somehow move us as the human family together and onto a new level, a new consciousness of non-killing and non-violence? And that has to be both small steps and it has to be big steps. And here in Finland, for your university to be as it does, as many do, networking with universities. I know this is happening all over, and this is what's so exciting, networking with universities and refusing to allow a Cold War in Europe to develop. Because, you know, the Cold War, the real war, wasn't a whole big conflagration. It happened quite quickly. And you're in the heart of Europe. And I believe we need to be busy peacemaking, to be busy building bridges, to be busy multiplying dialogues all over the world so that we come to understand and celebrate diversity and different cultures and learning to live with differences. And we've had this awful humanitarian crisis of refugees. Well, you know, we know why people are fleeing their countries. We know that they've been bombed and destroyed and there's famine and they haven't enough water. Do you know in Syria, when you look back and when history will record that when they didn't get enough water coming through from Turkey into the farmers in northern Syria, the farmers couldn't grow food and were all of a sudden experienced poverty and went to Damascus to try to get jobs. And I asked one farmer from northern Damascus, why did you join the Islamic State? Because that is a theology and a violence and a brutality. We must challenge that kind of old thinking that's cruel and inhumane. The thinking, the theology must be changed to be humane based on international law and human rights. And I asked this farmer, why did you join the Islamic State? And he said to me, I was a farmer. We didn't have enough water for our crops. Our crops failed. We were poor. We fled to Damascus in order to try to get some employment. There wasn't enough employment in Damascus. And Islamic State fighters from other countries came and offered us money to work with them. And I had a family to feed. I joined them. I realized that their theology, their thinking, their fundamentalists, Salafists, I realized there's so much cruelty in that. I can't be part of that. And when the Syrian government offered an amnesty, I went and took the amnesty. And I'm now working for our Syria to be saved, for us to have get back to some kind of normality in our country, and to stop the Islamic fighters and those who are fighting in our country to solve our problem. Now, we can go to the roots of why people take violence and understand why they become violent and they take violence. And often it is because they have been humiliated, they have been destroyed of all hope, they have lost belief that people really care about them. And They are fleeing in desperation for a better life. So I would appeal for compassion, for understanding, for the European countries to realise we have responsibility for these wars that destroyed these countries. Do you know, I heard about an interview with a young French pilot, and France, of course, being part of NATO, and the French were involved in the bombing of Libya. And before he went out, he told his experience on the radio. He asked his commanders, "Where shall I drop the bombs?" And he was told, "Anywhere." And he flew, as his companions did, over Libya, and they dropped bombs, and they killed hundreds of people, and they weren't the only ones. But there's something crazy, crazy, crazy about us living in the heart of Europe, and our government's asking us to have austerity cuts, where we don't have enough hospitals and education and health care to take care of our own people and jobs for our own people, because they are also going to other countries because there's not enough jobs. There is just something so crazy about this when we are asked to increase our military budgets to NATO by 2% and be part of a military, industrial, media complex that is destroying countries and preparing to destroy the next country. There is something not right about that. We have got to begin to rethink our whole thinking based on the absolute truth that every human life is sacred, that we can build non-killing, non-violent societies, and we can put the money out of militarism. Because we live in a rich world. We're not poor. The world's not poor. The world's rich. We're just spending our money on militarism and war, when we should spend our money on the little children of Syria or Afghanistan or Libya or wherever of these countries who are desperate for hope, desperate for help, desperate for the world to wake up and start helping them, not destroying them. So it's the priorities. So if we can unite, wherever we are, wherever we live, in whatever country, if we can unite based on our humanity, our being, we are human beings. We are beings in the world today. And everyone, every being is important. They're not a statistic. They're not somebody who put on a plane and sent back to some refugee camp where they lived for 60 years. You know, Sudan, 60 years in refugee camps. Palestine inside Lebanon, 40-odd years inside Lebanon, Palestinian refugees. And Israelis still refusing to uphold international law and human rights. Israelis still refusing to end occupation of Palestinian lands. Israelis still shooting dead any young Palestinian who raises their voice for dignity and human rights and his family not to be destroyed. We need to recognise we can build the alternatives. Do you know, I won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1976. And my goodness. I remember crying because what was I going to do with the Nobel Peace Prize? I remember thinking, my God, I don't know anything. I know nothing. What am I going to do? You know, we all know nothing in comparison to what is to be known in our wonderful, wonderful world and cosmos. We study a little bit. We get a little bit inside a certain area. An engineer, a linguist, a psychologist, a spiritual leader, political leader. We all get a little glimpse, if you like, in the darkness. And that can make us sometimes very afraid that we don't know anything and we've so many problems. What do you do? And you can wake up at night and say, oh my God, the world, all the refugees, so much problems. But you know, it's far better to think positive, because the power of positive thinking can change you and move you onto a new level. And instead of thinking, well, I don't know nothing, recognize you do know a great deal. But more important, when you link up with someone else who has the information you need, then you can do great things together. So have the humility to recognize, I've only got a little bit of information, but I can link up with somebody who can help me with this. And isn't the magnificent, magnificent thing that we can link up with the world? I invite all of you, if you want to feel hopeful, just Google a little group in Kabul. www. Our Journey to Smile. And here in the heart of Kabul, better still go and visit them. Better still link up with them and make a project together. And here in the heart of Kabul, you have these young men and women who are going out and bringing kids off the streets and teaching them English and linking up with the whole world through their Skype and asking the world for millions of people, of friends of the Afghani people, so that they can talk to you and improve their English. And it's magnificent. It will really lift your spirits because they believe in a world where people smile, where people treat each other as human beings and human dignity, where it's borderless, where people are realizing we can help each other. Now let's get together and the work. So I end my talk on saying that I am very, very hopeful for the future. I feel very privileged to be here with you because you are the future. Because peacemaking, conflict resolution, you are the people who must lead the way. Because the militarists are acknowledging those who are making nuclear bombs, making nuclear weapons that we can't use. Those who are doing that understand they're caught in a system, God help them, that they've inherited. They're caught in systems that they've inherited that don't help humanity. And they know they need to change. They know it. The militarists know they need to change. They need to be transformed. They need to find better ways of solving problems. And we all have to help each other. There are no enemies in the world of peace building, conflict resolution, non-killing, non-violent human societies. Frail people, people who make mistakes, like those who took the guns in the Islamic State, all those young men. Heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. They have families at home wondering about them, wishing they hadn't made that choice, wishing it had been different, wishing the theology that they came out of had taught them love, compassion, forgiveness, reconciliation, humility, kindness, wishing they had learnt all these things so that when the hard choices came, they would have chosen the non-violent, non-killing way. That's your task, to move out of a culture of militarism, taught it by us every day on every television screen around the world. I come from Belfast. We have a very militaristic UK. Everything's about militarism and war and how we won the war and how we won the next war and who we must kill next and how we will do it very well. And updating our nuclear weapons. Because yes, we have signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty under international law, but that doesn't really mean anything. We will spend billions of pounds updating our nuclear weapons because there's bound to be somebody out there that we will eventually drop a nuclear bomb on. I mean, how do you sort that out? How do you understand how we got there? And that's your job, to build a culture of non-violent, non-killing, to build the alternative thinking in here. Because it's the thinking that has to change. It's the structures that have to be completely dismissed. So thank you very much for what you're doing, because you are our hope. You are our future. You are the ones who will give and build a secure future for your children. It's your children. I have 5 grown children, 6 grandchildren. I have a wonderful life. But I realize that we have to work for peace, not just theorize, not just write another book and put it in the library. Many books have you written? 20 books. My God, if you write one book, you've said it all. You know what I mean? I really think we need activists, people out there building the peace and working together with the universities, with the people who are thinking what the new way forward is. So again, great privilege to be with you. I consider it an honour, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of days to hearing from you all. And thank you very, very, very much. You're enormously patient. You're already good peacemakers. Thank you very much. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you, dear Máiread, for your very inspiring speech. And thank you for putting smiles on our faces. And thank you for reminding us about the importance of humility, reconciliation, and kindness. And also thank you for coming here, for your time, for sharing your thoughts about peace, peacemaking, peace building in terms of ensuring basic human rights to all, empowerment of women, reconciliation, conflict resolution, and by creating understanding among the people. And now we have a couple of minutes reserved for questions and a discussion. So whenever you have a question, please raise your hand, and I'm going to bring a microphone for you. Yes, other side.
Hello, my name is Maria Fuentes. I've been doing my PhD on conflicts in the forestry sector in Latin America from the local community perspective. And listening to you, I completely agree with you, and I feel so happy that we're talking in these terms, because everything that I've seen on the conflict side is just the complete opposite. But what I've studied is actually where the world is going with the globalization and all this, where the power is moving towards the global corporations. And what does this do at the local level? And what I'm wondering is, I've been in communities that are divided because half of the community has been supporting global investments, and the other one has been defending Mother Earth, defending their way of living, their way of creating life, which will be destroyed with these investments. And I've followed this for quite a long time now, and I'm wondering, I've now just came back and talked to them there, that how can you start reconciliation processes in that kind of environment, where you have people that are desperate and hooked up to this global system to get food on their table, which is completely legitimate for them because there's no other option. And then you have these kind of livelihoods that will be destroyed or have already been destroyed, and people have been forced, just as in Syria, into big cities, and you just see the conflicts coming everywhere. So how do you start this kind of reconciliation process in that kind of environment? And I think that we see this coming in Finland now as well. We have this desperation of finding ways of getting food on our table. It's coming with austerity measures and all these things. We're in big dangers of seeing what's happened in other countries in Europe. So how can we stop that? And how can we foster this, what you are talking about, before we get the divisions in the communities? So, and also, how do we reconcile it once it's happened?
Well, I think we start with the acknowledgement we are faced with enormous challenges, and we have to solve them. And most of these challenges are connecting us as a human family now. We can't do it individually on our own. We need each other. So the importance of challenging our political leaders to sit down and to negotiate and to try to solve the problems on that international level. But the also importance, it's like a twin-track diplomacy or a multi-track diplomacy, the absolute importance of starting where you are to see what you can do and not waiting for politicians or others to do it, and to start at the base of the community. And this is where it's exciting, because we are seeing so many movements now at the base of community, small groups, looking at all the different issues and trying to see how they can solve them. But I think it's also important that we try to understand too, it's about relationships. Do you know, Thomas Merton said, I love Merton, he's a great spiritual writer, American. Merton said, you know, we start off wanting to save the world and we come back realizing it's all about relationships, and that's as it should be. If you join a group to work for end world poverty, that group builds small relationships. Peace is relational. You build the relationships. But in building those relationships, and you build them, Alice Walker talks about, in times of conflict and faced with so many challenges, we deepen our human relationships in our families. And that will give us strength, and that is very important. And I don't just mean the immediate biological family, I mean the wider family, the university family, the college family, whatever. But we deepen our relationships. But in deepening our relationships, I think we come to a closer sense of ideas and ideology. Everybody has a different idea of how you do things. Put a few people together in a room and they all have different ideas. No, I would want to do it this way, I want to do it that way. But we shouldn't split on ideas. We should be pliable. Ideas change, ways of doing things change, but that should not divide us and make enemies out of each other. And for me, this is one of the greatest challenges to the peace movement. I mean, we're all in the peace movement. Whatever we're doing, we're moving towards a different world, towards a change. I hope demilitarization, universal demilitarization, no wars, and non-killing. I mean, that's our vision. But in the meantime, we have to sit around the table and figure out about our ideas of how to do things. But let's not split on the ideas. Let's sit at that table till we find the solution. And for me, that recognition of, you could be right or wrong, I could be right or wrong, but we're friends, and we're not going to divide over this. And that will build the international network, so that we're not competing against each other, we're cooperating with each other and looking at the ideas of how we move forward. Because the movements in Latin America are very impressive. The base communities and how they're trying to protect their community. But bringing them together with the people at the top who are taking, and the multi-corporation people who are taking decisions that are going to destroy their lives, we have got to connect. We've got to connect so that the stories of the local community and the cutting off of the water has happened in Syria, that story can be told so that somebody in Egypt realizes, my God, they needed that water, their crops collapsed. You know, Turkey, you know, that connection of where people say, oh my God, I never thought of that. So connections, dialogue, always listening to each other and being willing to take on board a new perspective on the situation, a new way of seeing it, and I think that will help bring about change.
Thank you, Mairead. Any more questions?
Hi, My name is Basit. I am Master Student of Peace, Mediation, Conflict Research over here in Akademi University. My question is how to stop the warmongers, like the people who are always keeping the wars. For example, there has been a talk going on, a peace talk between Pakistan and the Taliban in Afghanistan that are going to attack over in Pakistan. But unfortunately, there were drone attacks and the whole peace process just collapsed. Again, there was going to be peace talks between Pakistan and India over the issue of Kashmir. But there had been this attack in Pathankot, the airbase in India, and the whole peace process, it again collapsed. So there is always this secret force that has been creating wars that don't want the peace in the region. So how can we deal with them?
Well, I think that I agree with you. There are war profiteers. There are people who make money out of wars. And we've seen this in Syria with fighters being paid for and brought in and given arms to bring down a government. We witnessed this. And we see in the politicians, for their own political purposes, refusing to make peace. And I think that is why it's so important that we build up the peace movement, the anti-war movement, the anti-militarization movement, that wherever we are, we build local peace groups, we connect with those of similar and those of dissimilar ideas to try to how do we solve this problem. We ask of the United Nations to uphold its mandate. The UN mandate is to save the world from the scourge of war. And it's not, we need to say to the UN, this is your mandate to stop wars in the world, not condoning or letting one group do it and the other group not doing it. So we need really to challenge the UN to uphold its mandate. Now, the UN manifesto, where they've set out 17 sustainable development goals to be money out of militarism and meeting these goals by 2030. Those development goals are very important. I know you have taken the number 16 for building non-killing societies, which is excellent. But there are other things in those development goals that we can apply and see that our governments are made responsible. How are you meeting those goals? Instead of saying, well, we're giving so much to updating nuclear weapons, but what are you doing for poverty, to end poverty? What are you doing to end, to make gender equality? Make them, our governments, accountable for meeting the goals of the UN, which have been agreed by all the countries. That's an important educational tool, and campaigning for governments to meet these. We could meet all those UN stipulations and requirements quite easily by 2030 by taking only a minute piece out of military budgets and putting it into meeting these things like education, healthcare, so forth, you know. So make governments accountable, educate people that they have power, and that they should be asking their legislators and parliamentarians, what are you doing for this? And making them accountable. And so that's important. Now, it's very sad to see that in the like of Article 9, the Japanese peace movement, wonderful peace article. And the Japanese peace activists since the Hiroshima-Nagasaki bombing, very strongly leading the way on peacemaking. And now the Japanese government, for geopolitical reasons, is now beginning to look at changing Article 9 in the Japanese peace constitution. We should be helping our Japanese friends to maintain that Article 9. And furthermore, if Article 9 in the Japanese peace constitution was talked about on the floor of the United Nations, and it's a peace article rejecting war, and at the United Nations all countries ask, look at your constitution, put into it something equivalent to the Article 9, that we will be a peace constitution a peace country. So trying to find ways of challenging and supporting those on the ground who are trying to make peace wherever they are.
Now, there you go.
Yes, my name is Nina. I have a question about women at peace negotiations. How do we get more women at the negotiation tables when we don't have so many women in the military? And often, there are high politicians and there are military people at these negotiations. And we need more women at these negotiations. If you look at Liberia, Rwanda, Northern Ireland, women have made a great difference.
Well, I think that to encourage women first go off to believe in themselves and have confidence that their opinions are important and that they need to raise their voices and be part of the decision-making process. And they will bring a new thing to the table, as happened in Northern Ireland when women sat around the table. Nobody was talking about prisoners, and the women at the peace negotiations talked about the release of political prisoners and how that was necessary as part of a peace healing process. So women will bring a different perspective to the table, and it's important to get them round, and we really should be heading towards 50-50 democracy. Why are we in this imbalance? So we've a way to go in doing that, but women, and I think this question, Anne Patterson will address it tomorrow, but women are coming to the fore. I remember the first time we went to Berlin in the occupied territory in Palestine to be part of protesting the wall, and we marched with all the men, and the women looked out from behind the doors, and we slowly watched how the Arab women, Palestinian women, started coming out, and now they lead the non-violent protests and movement for change inside Palestine. So you see, I think that women are coming out there realizing that they have a role to play, but men too have to give women the opportunity, not give them, but also encourage them too, that they have a voice and that their new thinking will bring new change as well. So I'd love to see that happening.
Thank you for your answer. And I've seen 3 more hands. So one over here, over there, and it was somewhere else, and so 4 hands. And I guess this will be our last questions for today's session, and I'm sure Máiread will have some more time in the afternoon to answer all your questions during other panel discussions.
Thank you, Máiread, for your excellent speech. I just want to compliment you with some information, and my brother from Pakistan will get his answer, I think. Macroeconomic Commission in the World Bank has strongly recommended that to eradicate the poverty, only 0.4% of the GDP, if the rich countries from EU and especially from OECD countries give to the African and Asian countries, then within 5 years there will be no more poverty. And it's more than 25 years, no one did that. Instead, now they are ready to give 2% of their GDP to NATO. So it's really irony of the so-called civilization. And I don't understand, because there are so many rules and laws and bylaws in United Nations and all the UN agencies. There are so many rules and blah, blah, blah. Why none of this is effectively working against these warmongers? And there are one economic Nobel laureate, I forget, it's 1992 or 93. He received the Nobel Prize in economics. He showed that all these rich countries are rich because of war. Their economic growth rate is high because just of war. If there is no war in that year, their economic growth rate has dropped significantly. So, in one hand, these big countries or economically big countries are creating the rules and laws and bylaws in United Nations. And on the other end, the backyard, they are playing these war games. So isn't it something treacherous to the civilization or towards our human so-called civilization?
Well, it does seem incredible that we can be asked to have austerity cuts across Europe, and at the same time governments asked to give 2% of the GMP for NATO, and NATO operating north of this country in military-industrial exercises, preparing for war, and indeed upping the ante of fearology. Because if you prepare for war, you've got to have an enemy. So who's the enemy? So you create the fear. And it's a war propaganda. And you create the fear, oh, there's somebody out there, that's our enemy. And then people buy into fear, unfortunately. So I think we start with ourselves by saying no to fearology. I am not going to be made be afraid of anyone. And we have to do that ourselves. No to fearology, because it is war propaganda. And so we have to nail that. And we do it ourselves by connecting to other people and humanizing them. And we do it ourselves by going to these countries where we can and working in them and learning from these countries. I mean, people in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya, cultured, good people, who many of them have progressed their communities, the heart of civilization. I mean, languages came from these places. When you go to them, they speak several languages. And I say, how many languages do you speak? I'd say none, my own badly, but none. And they're speaking several languages. And we somehow in the West have the arrogance to feel that by putting together a couple of our political leaders out of university who have the answers to our Syria and Libya and Afghanistan and the African countries, what they should be doing. And that's a form of colonization. We still are in the intellect that we can somehow know better than these countries, instead of reversing the process and recognizing these countries have their own cultures, their own languages, their own way of doing things, their own plans, and allowing them to say, this is how we want to live. Not the other way around. So we have to stop this intellectual colonization coming from the West, particularly our media, that somehow we know best what somebody living in a village in the other side of the world should be doing. And we haven't a clue. So we've done it before, we continue to do it. The media plays the game. The media still gives the voice to the militants, to the warmongers, to the arms sales traders. And instead of giving the voice to people like yourselves who have got alternative thinking, who have new policies. And it is a disgrace that we live in the 21st century and that we spend all this money on militarism and war and that we have children dying of preventable diseases for a few euros that could be given their sight back. For a few euros that could be given fresh water. For supporting those on the ground in these countries who have the solution with resources and help, not telling them how to do it, and for having the humility to understand we can learn from them. So we really have to stop this idea that somehow militarism is the answer. It's not. Militarism's the problem. Violence, militarism, arms, they're the problem. And peaceful countries, we say, well, Sweden's a lovely peaceful country. I'm sure Finland's a peaceful country. But Sweden makes a lot of money out of the arms trade. So it sells money to these poor countries. It takes off the money, the payment for the arms trade and more, and leaves them poorer than they started off, but with a lot of arms and guns that are being used by people, particularly disenchanted, disenfranchised, disillusioned young people on the streets who take a gun because they don't have a job. We don't have jobs. We don't have hope. You know, as a young Mexican man said on the television the other day, he is into kidnapping, and he kidnaps people and kills them if he doesn't get the money. And when the young journalist asked him, why do you kidnap people? And he says, because I can, and because I have no money, and because I need money. You know, we need to kind of find ways of giving people freedom to make their choices of how they want to develop their countries, and trying to build a more equal world and allowing them to do so, and learning from others. So definitely we can do that. We can do that.
Thank you. We have one more question here from the B student.
Hello, my name is Gadea, and I'm a primary school, primary teacher. And although I'm not directly studying peace, I've always been very concerned about this topic. And that's the reason why I always work in projects with, when I do my teaching practice, I always try to work on topics related with peace and so on. And this year, I decided to do as my final thesis a project related with the refugees here and in Spain, in order to extract conclusions about the topic. So I've been reading a lot about the topic itself, and my question is, what do you think that it would be the best way to solve this problem? You as a person that have been worked so many years with peace, and that know probably this problem from the inside. What would be for you the best way of solving this refugees crisis that is every day in the media? Because that's the question that comes up to my mind and to many minds of the kids. So I would like to ask you that question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. End the wars. End militarization of our communities and our world. Abolish NATO. Stop bombing other people's countries and allow them to develop their own way. Do you know, whenever, over 100 years ago, Alfred Nobel left his money and his will, and he stipulated a political agenda in his will over 100 years ago. And the woman who encouraged him to do it was Bertha von Suttner. And she was the first woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize over 100 years ago. And she wrote a beautiful book, and I think for women we need to uplift Bertha and what she done and what she said. She wrote a beautiful book called Lay Down Your Arms. And in Alfred Nobel's will, he left his money for champions of peace. And in that he said, no armies, have peace congresses, and fraternity amongst the nations. And she talked about, she went all across Europe to meet in those days, kings and queens, because she had a political peace agenda 100 years ago. Now, can you ever imagine that had we followed that, stop, no armies, peace congresses to discuss the issues so we see the solutions, because it's the solutions we're looking for here, and we each can bring an answer to that. And fraternity amongst the nations, friendship amongst the nations, so you didn't have an enemy. You built friendships, economic, political, spiritual friendships amongst all people, and a one world. You know, that agenda, to me, is our agenda now. We must make peace a beautiful thing, a very important thing, and not have it seen as something where you can be sidelined, you know, daisies in your hair and dancing in the valley. You know what I mean? Peace is serious. Of course there's time for daisies in your hair and dancing in the valley. I have a granddaughter who just does that, but But peace is a very serious issue. And standing up saying, I am a peacemaker. I'm very proud of being a peacemaker. I will work as long as I can, in any way I can, being a peacemaker. I'm very proud of it. So it's not something, because we are now proud of our militarism and our military history. And my God, haven't we had enough of it? That was the way people did in the old days, because that's what they thought. We're in a new generation. We know we've got to change onto a new course. So to be very proud, and make your pupils very proud of being peacemakers, and having a wee peace project of some kids on the other side of the world, something practical to help them. So there's children understand that, that the children on the other side of the world need other brothers and sisters. So cultivate that kindness. I love the Dalai Lama because he believes that kindness is everything. And I think he's right. Kindness is everything. If you teach children to be kind to everybody and all that they meet, they'll grow up with kindness. And they won't torture people. They won't support Guantanamo Bay and lifting people and dehumanizing them. So I think kindness, and I think also too we have a very important role of stop demonizing the Islam and the Islamic world. It is now the new enemy, as unfortunately the Jewish people during the Holocaust, they were the enemy. We are now focusing on Islam and everything Islamic instead of celebrating the Islamic world and everything beautiful in the Islamic world and the Muslim world. So we celebrate each other's culture and we celebrate each other's faith. For people who are religious, it's very chic in the world today to be against somebody's religion. Oh, I don't, religion. I'm not religious. But, that is disrespectful to those who believe that their faith, their religion, has beautiful things in it. And that it's good for them. Their spiritual life is important. And we must respect people's choice to choose their culture, their religion, their whatever that is, as long as it is not in any way violent or brutal or doesn't uphold human dignity. So that's important. In cultures that we meet, people, sometimes you go to foreign countries and they'll say to you, I hate the word foreign, but other countries, and they say, well, that's not our culture. And, it's in international law and human rights, but it's not our culture. But, we all have things in our culture which we need to take out, dust off, look, and change. Saying, God, did we do that 20 years ago? Well, we don't do it today because we've learned something new. So we need to challenge also our own culture where it's cruel and inhumane. And the educationalists do that with great courage. But we also need to have the courage to say to another culture, rethink that. We have human rights, we have international laws, we have to base our world on this great body of law that we have created. Because that's for us as a human family, and we can buy into that and have the courage to challenge, especially our own culture, when it is cruel or inhumane. And I think you start with the children and creating a different way.
Thank you, Mairead. So we have two more questions over here and the one over there before we draw the session to an end. Would you like to start?
Hello, my name is Matthew. I'm from Nigeria, a peace student. Thank you for your wonderful speech. My question is this. From Nigeria, we have this crisis of Boko Haram against Western education, and also the Niger Delta agitating of their land oil split, and also the indigenous peoples of Biafra also agitating of their freedom. And for some time now, for months now, the leader of that indigenous people has been held in cell for some time. So with your experience and the way you fight for the North Island And like you mentioned that you met a farmer, you were asking him the reason for this war of a thing, and he was saying that it's because of the unmet needs. So what ways do you think the government should follow or apply to bring this conflict resolution into a reality so that that country will have a peaceful and non-killing society? Because right now it has really bring down the GDP of the country so low that even it seems that the government don't know what to do again. So what advice or solution do you think you can give to such situation? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Marty. And you've asked a big question there. And I think that the role of the government and the civil community working together to find peaceful solutions to how you solve the problems in Nigeria. We had to come to our own position in Northern Ireland, recognising there wouldn't be military solutions to what was a deep ethnic political problem, one of the deepest complicated problems in the world in Northern Ireland. But we knew militarism is not going to solve this. The government acknowledged that. The government acknowledged that by removing basic civil liberties and human rights was adding fuel to the fire, because the more they were using repression, and it was counterproductive. And the only way, those using the armed struggle, we invited those using the armed struggle to put up the gun and come into our community. We didn't come out to condemn them, to call for capital punishment, to isolate them. We recognised they were part of our communities. We recognised they had a reason for doing what they were doing. We didn't agree with the methods or what they were doing. And we made that very vocal by coming out onto the streets to say stop the violence. But we tried to create a kind of an atmosphere whereby we were entering into a dialogue, a negotiation, to try to listen to each other and where we were each coming from. And in Northern Ireland, with the like of the Loyalist paramilitaries, the IRA, the British government started to talk to them. Now they were saying out loud, we will never talk to terrorists, no, no, no. And at the same time, behind the scenes, they were talking to them, because they recognised you can't kill them all, you can't kill everybody, and there's some reason behind this. Let's listen, let's find. And that's where the mediators and the negotiators came into play in solving our conflict, because they played a behind the scenes, very, very courageous, bringing on board the different factions of our society to move forward to see how it could be solved. And Anne will be talking tomorrow, and she will touch on that, the importance of mediation, conflict resolution. But recognising in these deep, deep situations, you're not going to do it militarily. It doesn't work. Drone bombing people is the problem. You're setting the fear of God in them, and they'll lift their children and flee, and you'll get them to Europe from every country you want them from. Because this is what happens. If somebody came in here with a gun under their arm and threatened our families, we would flee to wherever we would get safety. So the refugee crisis all over the world is because in communities people are afraid and for their lives. But dealing with ethnic conflict in our situation too, ethnicity can be murderous. When we as human beings put into how we identify ourselves, and we identify ourselves as almost against other people. Like in Northern Ireland, we have two very strong main identities. And these identities they've grown up separate. They've a great fear of each other. They went to separate schools. They didn't know each other. They never became friends. They never built trust. They never built equality. They never dealt a political system that was inclusive, rather majoritarianism, isolating the minority. So you know all this. You know all this is to be dealt with if you're going to solve the problem. But if we identify ourselves as, I'm Catholic, Protestant, I'm Catholic, Irish, nationalist, I am not Unionist, Protestant, British. These are the two main identities. If you put so much into these identities, if they're threatened, you can't kill each other. That's the reality that we're faced with in the human family. People can kill each other. And there's a certain arrogance in looking out to another country where you see people burning down whole villages and you say, oh my God, how did they get there? We can all get there. It's not difficult. And that's the urgency of us learning how we mellow these identities and come to respect each other and learn to live together in diversity and difference without killing each other and solve the problems that are there. That's the biggest challenge. How do you deal with ethnic conflict, particularly when the country and the people are well armed, or fundamental extremism coming in religions there that's teaching that somehow you're superior and they're inferior because they don't have your religion. So, I mean, the education thing is where we need a lot of money out of from governments into educating people to learn to live with ethnicity and identity. So I say talk to Boko Haram. I say get the women, and I know it's happening. We were in Liberia. We've seen the women mobilising to talk to those using violence and encourage them to put up the gun and recognise their humanity. They're human beings. They've taken the wrong road. They're doing awful things. We all acknowledge that. But, you know, sending in drone bombers to bomb from the sky and kill civilians, where you know it doesn't solve. It's just it's inhumane too. So I think we need to find a different thinking if you want to try to solve these problems. So good luck to you, Marty, in Nigeria. And I know that there are a lot of people working there on the ground along solving their problems. So we've very good hope for you in the future.
Hi. My name is Msilanga. I'm in the Peace Program. You mentioned something earlier. You said that the people in the government are not bad, but it's the policies, if I'm not mistaken. But yes, I tend to disagree with you, because if you're not a bad person, why would you be behind a policy that's bad at the end of the day? So it's not really the policies, it's the policy makers, and at the end of the day it still rolls down to the individual. If I'm a good individual, I'm not going to spearhead a policy that I know will eventually hurt people. But if I am if all I think about is the self, or I'm greedy, then that's what I'll do. So I just wanted to say I kind of disagree with you on that aspect, that it's just the policies and not the people. It's the people, because they're the ones who inevitably make up the policies. Well,
you know, I have, thank you very much for your comment, but I think that, you know, no one person is all good or all bad. We all have goodness in us, and we all have a dark shadow that in the piece we're trying to kind of overcome a bit. But, you know, there's nobody, I don't think you can have all good and all bad. I think that's too simple, and life is not simple. But when it comes to government and their policies, you see, I think we really need to try to encourage people who are negotiators and alternative thinkers and peacemaking to link in with government people and produce alternatives for them. So, sometimes when people run for political office, they're not sure of what policies, so they have two people. They can go to the foreign minister, the foreign office, or they can go to the Department of Defence, which is really the War Department. But they don't have someone there like a peace advisor or peace department. Every government in the world should have a peace department so that people like yourselves are bringing alternative ways of solving these problems and educating ministers to doing it in a different way. Everybody wants to help, but sometimes people can't clearly see that the policies are very, very destructive. Now, we're in the throes now of a new American president, and it's the policies in the American government of foreign policies of war, which are we have to work to change that. And we do that through educating by saying that system is not producing peace policies, and it's not producing peace in the world. I mean, we all know that. So you need to change the policies and help change the thinking. And only people on the ground can do that. Somebody once said, there go my people and I am their leader. People power. Politicians will move only after the people have moved. They're politicians. So people power in spelling out an alternative. And that's why it's very, very important that we build the peace movement, wherever you live. Build the peace movement, the demilitarization movement, right across Europe. That peace is possible, and peace is what we want, and we don't want war policies. And that will come from the base up, because we are the superpower. All over the world, if you add up the gender equality, the environmental, human rights movement, the climate change movement, you multiply all that of people who've never gone into political power. But you multiply that, and you have a huge movement across the world that is moving for change. And there's a new consciousness that we have to do things in a better way. We're better than this. And the talk now that NATO's going to bomb Libya again, I mean, that's horrible. We're better than this. We can do better. So I really think we need to network and increase and grow that peace movement in the world that's spelling out the alternative, and get that through to our political leaders.
Mairead, thank you so much for your inspiration. I think you've jump-started our conference in setting us in a mood and with ideas that I think will really work well over the next few days. And thank you all for your questions and your being here. I hope you will also join us for the next other couple of days. We are a bit late, so we probably will restart at 1:15 instead of 1, so we have a bit of more time for lunch. And hope to see you all then. Thank you again.